let's dive into this piece on the UN's climate priorities for 2025.
All right.
We've all seen this Metinyapushtirolda report, right?
Yeah,
So we're all kind of on the same page about how serious things are.
definitely.
And, I mean, Guterres did not hold back in his speech to the General Assembly.
No, we did not.
Pandora's box, catastrophic climate crisis, even comparing the LA wildfires to something out of a disaster movie.
It's pretty striking language, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
What I find really interesting, though, is that he doesn't just dwell on the doom and gloom.
Right.
He actually lays out a plan.
Yeah.
Like a roadmap for what we can do. And there's actually a lot of optimism there, too.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That really comes through when he talks about the renewable energy revolution.
Absolutely.
He's basically saying it's unstoppable. Cheaper energy, healthier people, more secure energy sources.
And this isn't just empty talk either.
Right.
Remember COP28?
The big climate conference?
Exactly. 120 countries pledged to triple their renewable energy capacity by 2030.
Wow, that's huge.
It is a massive goal.
But is it even possible? I mean, we've got the International Energy Agency saying current government targets might not be enough.
Yeah, that's a real concern.
It's like we all want to get to this amazing destination.
Yeah.
But is there enough gas in the tank, so to speak?
It's a good analogy, and this is where things get interesting. Because the IEA also thinks the industry itself could grow even faster than predicted.
Really?
Yeah, potentially exceeding those goals. Driven by things like the cost of renewable tech going down, more demand for clean energy from businesses and people, and just a growing awareness that we need to move away from fossil fuels.
So we've got this tension then.
Exactly.
Between governments maybe not doing enough and the market kind of surging forward on its own.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic.
It really makes you wonder if this revolution could succeed even if there are roadblocks.
Right.
But renewable energy is just one piece of this puzzle, right?
For sure.
Guterres was also very clear that we have to slash emissions globally and fast.
Absolutely, if we want to avoid those record-breaking temperatures we keep hearing about.
Yeah, and every country is supposed to submit new climate plans this year.
That's right, adding another layer of complexity.
Definitely.
And Guterres actually suggested a minimum 60% reduction in emissions by 2035.
Wow.
Compared to that, that's a pretty ambitious target.
Yeah, especially after COP29 in Baku, which a lot of people felt didn't go far enough.
That's true. There's going to be a lot of pressure on countries to make bolder commitments at COP30 in Brazil.
Absolutely. And 2025 isn't just about setting new targets. It's about accountability, right?
Yeah.
Guterres made it clear that these new plans have to be carefully assessed. We need to find the gaps, and climate justice has to be central.
Exactly. This assessment process is going to be crucial.
For
But
sure.
it's not just about checking boxes. It's about making sure the transition is fair
Right.
and that it doesn't leave vulnerable communities behind.
And this leads us to another key point.
Yeah.
Phasing out fossil fuels.
Right. Guterres didn't mince words on that one.
Not at all.
He said, we can't have a fair and fast global fight without moving away from fossil fuels.
A strong statement, especially when you consider that globally.
Yeah.
Countries are spending 9 times more on making fossil fuels attractive than on supporting clean energy.
It's a staggering gap, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
And there are huge hurdles to overcome, too, like the cost of solar and wind power.
Right.
It's going down,
Right.
but it's still a barrier for a lot of countries.
Especially developing nations.
Absolutely.
So we're in this weird spot where the science is clear.
Totally.
Experts agree phasing out fossil fuels is essential, but the economics and politics are a mess.
It's a tough reality.
You've got oil-producing nations fighting against any language about phasing out fossil fuels in international agreements.
Yeah, it's a real tug of war.
Between what we need to do for the planet and what powerful interests are willing to accept.
That's the challenge in a nutshell.
And then there's the issue of climate finance.
Right.
Guterres called on developed nations to finally deliver on that $300 billion pledge
By 2035,
to help developing countries transition to clean energy.
which a lot of developing nations are skeptical about.
Oh yeah, they're saying it's too little too late.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if actions are matching the rhetoric.
Right. It does raise questions about whether we're really treating this with the urgency it deserves.
Exactly. This financial commitment seems like it falls short of those dire warnings we keep hearing about the planet.
Yeah, and this is where the UN's role becomes even more critical. I think Guterres really emphasized a just transition.
Right.
One that not only secures enough climate financing, but also tackles those fossil fuel subsidies we were talking about.
Yeah, those are a big problem.
And the UN is also going to have to push for things like carbon pricing.
You mean like cap and trade?
Exactly. Have you heard about that?
I have, but I'm guessing some of our listeners might not be familiar with it.
Right.
So maybe you could give us a quick explanation.
Sure. So cap and trade is basically a market-based way to reduce emissions. They set a limit or a cap on the total greenhouse gases certain industries can emit.
Uh-huh.
And then companies get allowances like permits to pollute up to a certain level.
Interesting.
And if a company emits less than its allowance,
Yeah.
they can sell their extra permits to companies that go over their limit.
Oh, so it's like creating a market for pollution reduction.
Exactly. It gives companies a financial incentive to clean up their act because they can actually profit from selling those unused allowances.
So it's a way to use market forces to drive environmental change.
Exactly. And of course, it's complicated.
Right.
There are debates about how effective these systems really are, but they're becoming more and more popular as a tool in the fight against climate change.
That's really fascinating to see how all these different approaches are coming together,
Yeah.
The push for renewables, cutting emissions, climate finance, carbon pricing.
It's like we're building this multi-pronged strategy.
Yeah, and
You know,
each piece is crucial.
and the success of the whole thing depends not only on the individual parts,
Yeah.
but on how well they all work together.
How well they're implemented.
Exactly. And that's why these national climate action plans and how they're assessed are so important.
Right, and remember, all of this is going to be playing out on the world stage at COP30 in Brazil,
Big moment.
with those updated plans coming in, being evaluated, the pressure to deliver on those ambitious goals.
Yeah. It feels like a turning point, doesn't it?
It really does. And speaking of those goals, I can't help but think back to that IEA report.
Mm-hmm.
The suggestion that industry growth in renewables could actually outpace government targets.
It is a glimmer of hope,
It is. It suggests that maybe change is happening faster than we think.
possibly even if it's not always coming from the top down.
That's a really good point. It speaks to the power of innovation and the market to drive change.
For sure.
Governments have a crucial role, of course.
Absolutely. Setting targets, making policies.
But we're also seeing so much action from the private sector and from people.
It's encouraging to see that kind of bottom-up momentum.
It feels like the narrative is shifting. The challenges are huge. The stakes are incredibly high.
No doubt about that.
But there's also a growing sense of possibility.
I agree.
We're seeing new technologies, new collaborations, a renewed commitment to finding solutions.
It's a hopeful sign.
And let's not forget the role of individuals in all of this.
Absolutely crucial.
You, the listener,
Right.
you're part of this movement for change just by engaging with this information, by understanding the complexities.
You're becoming part of the solution.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a question I want to ask you, our listener.
Okay.
Imagine you're sitting at the negotiating table at COP30 in Brazil,
Wow.
surrounded by world leaders, scientists, activists,
What a scene.
everyone grappling with this monumental challenge. What would your top priority be?
That's a powerful question.
What would be your non-negotiable?
It forces you to think concretely about what needs to happen.
It does.
What are you willing to fight for? What compromises are you willing to make?
Yeah.
What sacrifices might be necessary to get to a truly sustainable future?
And it's not an easy question to answer.
Not at all.
There are so many competing interests, different perspectives, potential solutions.
It's complex.
But that's exactly why it's so important to have these conversations,
I agree.
to understand the nuances, to form your own informed opinions.
The more informed we are, the better we can hold our leaders accountable. Advocate for change, make choices in our own lives that align with our values.
Right, and as we dive deeper into Guterres' proposed solutions, I think it's important to remember this isn't just about abstract concepts or far-off goals.
Right.
This is about our planet,
Our future.
the legacy we're leaving for future generations.
That's what makes it so important.
That's why your engagement matters.
It really does. Each of us has a role to play in creating a world that's both just and sustainable.
Absolutely, and that's something powerful to keep in mind as we navigate these complex issues.
Oh, sure.
It really does feel like we're at a crossroads. And I think Guterres' speech, with all its warnings and calls to action, it's a potent reminder of the choices we face.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of the problem.
Absolutely.
But what strikes me about his message is that it's not just about fear, it's about empowerment.
Okay.
He's saying, look, we've opened Pandora's box, as he put it, but we also have the tools and the ingenuity to close it.
I like that. And he backs it up with concrete proposals.
He does.
The push for renewables, cutting emissions, climate finance, the role of the UN in making sure the transition is just,
Actionable steps.
steps that can move us toward a more sustainable future.
And what's encouraging is that those solutions are being embraced not just by governments and international organizations, but by businesses, investors, individuals too.
We're seeing a real groundswell of support for climate action.
And that's something to be optimistic about.
Absolutely. Think about all the innovation happening in the renewable energy sector.
For sure.
We're seeing amazing advancements in solar, wind, geothermal, all these clean energy technologies.
And those advancements are making renewable energy more efficient and affordable.
And creating jobs.
Right. New economic opportunities.
And it's not just about technology either.
It's also about consumer behavior.
Yeah, people are becoming more aware of their environmental footprint.
They're making different choices. Buying electric cars, reducing their energy consumption.
Supporting companies that are committed to sustainability.
It all adds up.
Yeah, these individual actions, when you multiply them across millions of people,
it can make a real difference.
It feels like a cultural shift is happening.
I think so.
A growing recognition that we're all connected.
And that our choices have consequences.
Exactly. And that shift isn't just driven by data.
Right.
It's driven by a sense of responsibility.
For the planet and for future generations.
And that sense of responsibility is what will ultimately drive the change we need.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about policies and technology.
It's about people.
It's about our willingness to work together toward a common goal.
And I think that's what Guterres was trying to tap into in his speech.
I agree.
Our collective capacity for hope.
For innovation.
And for action.
That's what will make the difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the UN's climate priorities for 2025, I want to leave you, our listener, with a sense of urgency.
Absolutely.
But also a sense of possibility.
The challenges are huge.
But so is our potential to overcome them.
We have the knowledge.
The tools.
The will to create a better future.
And remember, this deep dive was just the beginning.
There's so much more to learn.
To explore.
So many ways to get involved.
Keep asking questions.
Keep challenging assumptions.
Keep pushing for change.
Because ultimately, the future's in our hands.
Yeah, it does. It makes you wonder if we're really treating this like the emergency it's supposed to be.
Right.
This financial commitment, it seems to fall short of all those dire warnings we're hearing, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's where the UN's role becomes even more important.
Okay.
Guterres really highlighted the need for a just transition.
Right.
One that not only secures enough climate financing, but also addresses things like those fossil fuel subsidies.
Yeah, those are a huge problem.
They really are. And the UN's also going to have to push for carbon pricing.
Like cap and trade.
Exactly. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I have, but I'm not sure all our listeners are familiar with it.
Right.
Maybe we could give a quick rundown.
Sure. So cap and trade, it's basically a market-based way to reduce emissions.
Okay.
They set a limit or a cap on how much greenhouse gas certain industries can emit. And then companies get allowances, kind of like permits to pollute up to a certain level.
Interesting.
And if a company emits less than their allowance,
they
can sell those extra permits to companies that go over their limit.
Oh, so it's like creating a market for pollution reduction.
Exactly. Companies have a financial reason to clean up because they can profit from selling those unused allowances.
So you're using market forces to drive environmental change.
That's the idea. And of course, there are complexities.
Right.
People debate how effective these systems are in the real world.
Sure.
But they're being used more and more as a tool to fight climate change.
It's really fascinating how all these different approaches are coming together.
Yeah.
Renewables emissions cuts, climate finance, carbon pricing.
It's like building this multifaceted strategy.
And every piece is essential.
Absolutely. And the success of the whole thing depends not just on each individual part,
right,
but also how well they're integrated, how well they're actually implemented.
And that's where those national climate action plans come in.
Exactly, and how they're assessed.
Right, and remember, all of this is going to be playing out on a global stage at COP30 in Brazil.
It's a big one.
All those updated plans coming in, being evaluated, and that pressure to actually deliver on these ambitious goals.
Yeah, it does feel like a turning point.
It does. And speaking of those goals, I keep thinking back to that IEA report. That idea that industry growth in renewables could actually surpass what governments are targeting.
It's a bit of hope.
It is. It suggests maybe change is happening faster than we realize.
Even if it's not always coming from the top down.
Yeah, that's a great point. It shows how powerful innovation and market forces can be.
They're definitely major drivers.
Governments are crucial for setting targets and policies, of course.
Absolutely.
But we're also seeing so much action from the private sector and from individuals.
That bottom-up momentum is really encouraging.
It feels like the whole narrative is shifting.
Yeah.
The challenges are enormous. The stakes are incredibly high.
There's no denying that.
But there's also this growing sense of possibility.
I agree.
New technologies, new collaborations, a renewed commitment to finding solutions.
Definitely a hopeful sign.
And we can't forget about the role of individuals in all of this.
It's essential.
You, the listener, you're part of this movement for change just by engaging with this information, understanding the complexities.
You're becoming part of the solution.
Exactly. And that brings us to a question I want to pose to you, our listener.
Okay.
Imagine you're at COP30 in Brazil at the negotiating table.
Wow.
Surrounded by world leaders, scientists, activists.
Quite the image.
Everyone's trying to tackle this monumental challenge. What would your top priority be?
It's a powerful question, isn't it?
What's non-negotiable for you?
It makes you think concretely about what needs to happen.
It really does.
What are you willing to fight for? What compromises would you make?
Yeah.
What sacrifices might be necessary for a truly sustainable future?
It's not an easy question to answer.
Not at all.
There are so many different interests, perspectives, potential solutions.
It's incredibly complex.
But that's why it's so important to have these conversations.
Yeah, I agree.
To understand all the nuances, to form your own informed opinion.
The more informed we are, the better we can hold our leaders accountable. Push for change, make choices that actually align with our values.
So true. And as we keep exploring Guterres' proposed solutions, I think we need to remember this isn't just about abstract concepts or far-off goals. This is about our planet, our future, what we're leaving for generations to come.
It's about our legacy.
And that's why your engagement matters.
It really does.
Yeah.
Every single one of us has a role to play in creating a world that's both just and sustainable.
And that's a powerful thought to keep in mind as we try to make sense of all of this.
I agree.
Yeah, it does feel like we're at a crossroads.
It does, doesn't it?
And I think Guterres' speech, with all the warnings, the calls to action, it's a powerful reminder of the choices we're facing.
Absolutely. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by how big this problem is.
For sure.
But what I find really interesting about Guterres' message is that it's not just about fear.
Okay.
It's also about empowerment.
I see what you mean.
He's basically saying, look, we've opened this Pandora's box.
As he put it.
Right. But we also have what we need to close it.
And he does offer some pretty concrete proposals.
He does.
We've talked about renewables, cutting emissions, climate finance, the UN's role in a just transition.
Yeah, all of that.
These are all real steps we can take to move toward a more sustainable future.
And what's really encouraging is that it's not just governments and international organizations embracing these solutions. Right?
We've got businesses, investors, individuals too.
It feels like there's this groundswell of support for climate action.
There is, and that's something to be optimistic about.
It really is. I mean, look at all the innovation in renewable energy.
Yeah.
It's incredible, the advancements in solar, wind, geothermal, all these clean technologies.
And those advancements are making renewable energy more efficient and affordable.
Plus, they're creating jobs.
Exactly. New economic opportunities.
And it's not just technology.
Right.
We're seeing a change in how people are behaving, too.
Absolutely. People are more aware of their impact on the environment.
Yeah. And they're making choices that reflect that.
Buying electric cars, reducing their energy use, supporting companies that are committed to sustainability.
It's like we're seeing a cultural shift.
I think so, too.
This growing understanding that we're all connected.
And that our individual choices have consequences.
Exactly. And this shift, it's not just driven by data.
No.
It's driven by a sense of responsibility.
For the planet, for future generations.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what will drive the change we need.
I agree. Because in the end, this isn't just about policies and technology.
It's about
people. Our willingness to work together toward a common goal.
And I think that's really what Guterres was getting at in his speech.
Yeah.
Our collective capacity for hope, for innovation, for action.
And that's a powerful thing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the UN's climate priorities for 2025, I want to leave you, our listener, with a sense of urgency, but also a sense of possibility.
The challenges are enormous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But so is our potential to overcome them.
We have the knowledge, the tools, the will to create a more sustainable future.
We really do. And remember this deep dive. This was just the beginning.
There's so much more to learn, to explore, so many ways to get involved.
Keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, keep pushing for the change you want to see.
Because ultimately, the future is in our hands.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.